There we are. Welcome, everyone. Welcome in. Alrighty, let's get started. Welcome to the second Friday office hour. Okay, I am uh, informally known as Dr. Sunshine, the People's Professor. Um, and so I just want to introduce you all to this space. This is Under the Hood, and it is a double entendre. I'll let you think about it. This is a space where aspiring, current, retired STEM students and professionals can get together and hear the behind the scenes experiences in regard to being a person in STEM. Um, the content is largely directed towards early career people, BIPOC, first gen, LGBT, disabled people, to give us a space to commune together and share our experiences. A lot of times our voices get lost as we are one of a few or the only in whatever space that we're in. And so I'm hoping to build this community in support of those of you that may be feeling isolated, unsupported, et cetera, et cetera. So last week was a pilot, and I'm grateful for those who showed up to help me to troubleshoot the audio and video, specifically Subu. If you're listening, thank you. So first, I'm going to give a few tips about how to navigate YouTube. I recognize that people in academic spaces don't spend a lot of time on YouTube. I happen to, so you can remain relatively anonymous on the live stream if you're here. The only way you're going to self-identify is if your username is in your YouTube name, or if your name is in your YouTube username. Otherwise, I can't see when you're here. I can't see who liked the video stream. But I'd love for you to leave a comment um, and give some live feedback if you want. If you're watching from Twitter, I can't see. I can't see you there. So come on over to YouTube on your YouTube app to catch the live stream and interact on the chat. All right, and so now I'm going to introduce myself. Those of you that follow me on Twitter, you probably have an idea of my ethos, but maybe you all don't know me personally. I've been in academia for 12 years. I do count the time that I started as an undergraduate researcher at Georgia Tech with my advisor, Ted Russell. So I've seen a few things, experienced a few things. I've moved 5 or 6 times over my academic career for various positions. I've started 2 academic jobs before tenure, and I really think that this information needs to be public about the best practices, do's and don'ts. Um, yeah. So you can rest assured that I've seen enough and heard enough from other people to hopefully be able to help others in this space. Okay. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about why I started Friday office hour. A lot of you are probably thinking, okay, what is this about? Who cares? Why? This is not what traditional academics do. Well, for one, I started the series because I get pretty inundated with requests for one-on-one conversations, mentorship requests, training sessions, just about how to navigate STEM. Bohemian, we're so thankful you're here. Thank you, Bohemian Gypsy. And so I get really inundated, and I care probably to a fault because I want to spend all my time coaching people. So I'm hoping to streamline a little bit of the advice so that if anybody wants to hop on and listen to one of these conversations, they can feel connected and get some of their questions answered through the forum. Just a little bit about my experience. Some of my mentees are in high school. They're undergrads, they're post-baccalaureate scholars, postdoctoral scholars, obviously grad students, and other faculty members. Okay. So those of us BIPOC, we learn from each other because the generations before us had different challenges. They simply had different challenges. And sometimes that advice does not transfer over to a 21st century startup in the season of George Floyd. Okay, it's a different environment now, and that requires different advice. All right, so the other reason why I'm here is because based on the sheer amount of requests I get for advice about academia, undergraduate research, etc., even if those people have a formal advisor, that's letting me know that there's a gap in mentorship, even in 2022. Okay. And so a lot of times I would be talking to people and I'm thinking to myself, why isn't your advisor talking to you about this? What is going on here? And it's really frustrating. The other reason why I'm here is because I unfortunately am a little bit troubled about this model of mentorship where mentorship is behind a paywall. I'll explain what I'm talking about. Well, for one, there are these mentorship programs that seek to pair people up, but there's an exchange of money between the mentee or the mentor and their organization. And with this big old internet, it just doesn't make sense to me why we would even need to make payments for mentorship that should be free and accessible to everyone. And so everyone has a smartphone, just about. So why not just click on YouTube and listen to a professor just tell you what you may need to know. The other thing is that I'm having a little bit of struggle with our return to in-person conferences. Over the COVID-19 serious quarantine period, I observed that the participation in conferences went up. The demographics were different. People with disabilities were able to engage in conferences. And that was a beautiful thing. Some people had never been to conferences before. You know why? It's because it's inaccessible to everyone. The registration fees, the travel, just the general lack of support from the institution. And for those of you that are not in academia, you probably don't know this. The burden for paying for all of this falls on the students because we do things through a reimbursement system. So we're fronting all of the costs to go to conferences, and then we get reimbursed, which takes about a month and a half sometimes. And so as a graduate student, I held credit card debt, and then you get interest charges, and no, you do not get your interest charges reimbursed. So that's a serious issue in terms of accessibility. And I mentioned conferences because these training sessions, early career panels, and stuff like that is also behind that paywall. Yeah. So if you want to learn how to be an academic, your best bet is to, now that we're going back to in person, is to attend a conference and pay a bunch of money and hold it on your credit card. And hopefully you'll get some good advice. So that's why I'm here. All right. I'm hoping to just improve this type of mentorship and the accessibility to help in this way. All right. I'm hoping to also connect through my experiences with you, with the audience, and I'm hoping that you feel like someone can empathize with what you've been through. I have an infinite amount of stories to demonstrate how difficult it can be to be a double minority, sometimes triple minority in the STEM space. All right. I kind of want to also use this time to encourage whoever may be watching. As a little bit about myself, at some point along my academic journey, I worked 3 jobs at once. Yeah. So I was a part-time researcher in my lab. I was a nanny on the weekends, and I, for a little while, had a consulting position at River to Tap in Atlanta, Georgia. And that is a nod to a guest that we'll have on the show on Under the Hood in a few weeks. So at that time, I was working 3 jobs just to support myself. And I also had a dependent in my family who needed support as well. So for those of you first gens that are working to support your families while you're trying to get through graduate school, it's hard, but it's possible. And your story will be valuable to someone else in the future. I want to take this time to give a disclaimer. Okay. This platform is generalized and will give generalized advice. And I recognize that you may be in a very nuanced situation. So if you're having issues related to Title IX, so Title IX covers harassment and things that disrupt your educational experience, you need to reach out to your supervisor, or the person that is responsible for your well-being on campus. Okay, I am not going to be handling those types of situations here. Whatever I do on YouTube is covered under Title IX, so I have a responsibility to make sure that anything that happens in this space is adequately taken care of. I also want to make the disclaimer that any views that I express on this platform, they do not reflect that of any of the institutions that I've been affiliated with, right? I want to shout out Dean Sharon Walker, who started my faculty journey, who gave me the support to actually be right here to talk to people. Without her, I wouldn't be here to talk to you. She was my advocate for my first faculty position. So be sure to check out her episode in season 1 of Under the Hood. All right, she is now the dean at Drexel College of Engineering. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm just going to check Twitter really quickly. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about before I address the questions that I received in the form, I want to put in a plug for rising senior undergraduates, meaning that you're planning to graduate in the spring or summer of 2023. If you want to go to graduate school, the applications for fall 2023 admission are due in fall of 2022. So there's a 1-year lag between your application and your eventual enrollment as a graduate student. Priority deadlines are around October to December, depending on where you're applying to. So go ahead and get started. If you're completely clueless about applying to grad school like I was, go ahead and listen to episode 6 in season 1 of Under the Hood with a very special former student of mine, Miss Maggie Haraki. Maggie applied to 13 schools and she got accepted to probably over 60 to 75% of those schools. She is now studying as a PhD student in chemical engineering at Stanford. In my 4 years as a professor, I haven't seen a student prepare for graduate admissions like Maggie. So go and listen to her advice. She's really successful. Thank you, Maggie. Also, for those of you that want to raise money for your graduate experience, the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program accepts applications every October. And depending on your discipline, the due date is off by 1 or 2 weeks. I recommend getting started now because if you're doing undergraduate research in the summer, you can get support from your advisor to put your application together. There are strict eligibility rules for when you can apply for NSF. So one of those times is as an undergraduate with no graduate education. So this is a good time for you to apply because the only other time you can apply is within 12 months of graduate school after you've enrolled in grad school. If you're completely clueless about NSF GRFP, like I was, there is an episode about that as well. It's episode 5 of Under the Hood season 1, where Casey Finnerty, who is about to graduate with his PhD in environmental engineering from Berkeley, he tells best practices for applying for the GRFP. And he's been walking other students through this application for the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, and they've been pretty successful. So that's my announcement about graduate school. I will probably make that announcement in every office hour this summer. Okay. Now I'm going to answer the questions that were populated in the online forum. And if you have not had a chance to submit your question, I'll put that link in the chat. Okay. It's a Google form. I have to take email addresses to prevent any spam. So I'm sorry, it can't be that anonymous. All right. So the first question I'm going to answer is, what is your recommendation for finding the right balance between traditional academic requirements and community engagement? Okay, I thought this was a really good question. Okay, so first I want to talk about your responsibilities as an academic in an R1 research institution. Usually you have to split your time between research, teaching, and service. The rule of thumb in most places is you need to be spending 70% of your time on research, 20% of your time on teaching, and 10% of your time on service. So what I recommend you do is take a goal-oriented approach and divide those goals across those percentages. So, but one thing you need to consider is that community engagement may be incorporated into your research, teaching, and service. So as long as your activities in community engagement are fully integrated into your professional responsibilities, you should be able to balance your time effectively. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, I'm happy to follow up on that next week. Okay. The next question that I found to be interesting is, if some of your former students after graduation went on to collaborate amongst themselves and do premier research without you in your space, how would you react? It's a good question. Okay, it hits on a couple things. It hits on the advisor-advisee relationship. It hits on whether or not there's competitiveness with a mentee and a mentor. All right, here's my rule of thumb. Supportive advisors usually encourage their mentees to branch out after they graduate. Okay, they don't usually hold on and still try to control their mentees. Okay, one of the cases that comes to mind is, I'm sorry, I'm going to call some names, is that of Harvey Blanch, Professor Blanch of former Berkeley fame. Now he's at UCR. His mentee is a Nobel Prize winner. And she's doing independent work. But but I'm pretty sure Professor Blanche is super proud of her and probably would never resent her for going off and doing a great job. So, the hallmark of a great mentor is to support the efforts of their mentees once they're gone. So, I'll also touch on one other thing. When it comes to tenure, okay, I've been told that it's important for a new professor to establish independence from their advisor. So that's also a case where the advisor should be pretty supportive of you going off and doing your own thing because they understand what the tenure process is about. And hopefully they're supportive. So if that's not happening, you have a more nuanced situation on your hands, and you may want to consult some outside help. All right. So my personal opinion as an advisor is I get the most joy when I see my students going off and branching out and doing something amazing, especially when they started off as a fledgling researcher, and to watch the growth is a beautiful thing. I don't know if any other professors are on the line. If you are, can you just give me a thumbs up? The best part of the job is watching the growth. If anybody is unsupportive of your growth, you need to reevaluate that situation. Okay. Okay. The last question that I got, I don't think I received other questions. Let me see if any late breaking questions came in. Okay. So the next question is, how do you find the right balance between micromanaging graduate students so work gets done, but also giving them their space so that they can develop independent thinking abilities? Okay, I think this is a good question. Okay. So balancing micromanaging and then independence. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the spectrum or this continuum of graduate advising. On one extreme, you do have the micromanagers who want to meet with you every day, maybe multiple times a day. Maybe they're in the lab with you. They're over your shoulder, sitting down. They want to see the results every day. And then you've got the other end of the continuum where they're going to throw you in the deep end and it's sink or swim. Put in the chat what kind of advisor you had. Okay, sink or swim, micromanager. I have found a balance, and my grad students can tell me if I'm right or wrong, where I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I do about 2 to 3 touches per week for no longer than an hour at a time. And during those 3 touches, I'll talk about what those 3 touches are. I'm listening to their updates, helping them troubleshoot, and helping them goal set until the next time. So what are the 3 touches? For one, there is a 30-minute individual meeting that I have with every student every week, postdoc, undergrad, whatever. And that's their time to ask me questions, et cetera, et cetera. And I just tell them to give me their updates. And I'll talk about goal setting in just a second. The second touch is maybe a themed meeting where we're meeting about a specific paper we're trying to write as like a subgroup, or we're meeting about a sponsored project that we need to strategize about. So you've got your individual needs, and then you've got your project specific needs. And then the third touch, and not everybody does the second touch, but the third touch is a group meeting. And that's where everyone shows up, and we are either doing journal club, someone's giving a practice presentation for a conference, someone is practicing for an oral qualifying exam, we just did a writing workshop this week where I have a lot of first year students, rising second years, and so I taught them how to start their first manuscript. And so that's the third touch. And those are for an hour, 30 minutes to an hour at a time. This allows us to stay connected. It makes it, and we're doing it over the summer and throughout the year. I think this signifies, and I actually talked about this in the faculty series in part 7 about how these touches build community in your group and they build student morale. They make them think that you care. But how does this not lead to micromanaging? Well, I am goal-oriented and not time-oriented. I stress this to them. In general, we are setting monthly goals. Okay? So every month I'm like, okay, this is where we need to be, and hopefully let's get there. The way you stay away from micromanaging is you don't tell them how to get there. You give them advice, but you don't tell them how, when, where they can work, specifically how fast they need to go. As long as by the end of the month, you guys have results to talk about and you've helped them along the way, they feel like they have autonomy to think through the problem without you breathing down their neck. That's my advice. I'm going to credit my advisor, Ted Russell, for being super consistent with individual meetings and group meetings. So even if we didn't show up, he was always there. He always showed up. And when he couldn't show up, he'd let us know via email. Hey, I'm going to the dentist. Hey, this COVID vaccine just kicked my butt. Let's cancel meetings. And so I carried that into my own advising. I think it's effective. If any of my grad students are here, you can put me on blast if that's not true. All right. That's pretty much all the questions I was planning to field. All right. And so I don't see interactions online. And so I think I'm going to wrap up. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up by giving a little bit of a word of encouragement to anybody that's watching, whether you're in STEM, your family member is STEM, and you cannot understand why they have isolated themselves, why they won't answer the phone, why they're always exhausted, why they are probably seeking therapy, especially if they're first gen, BIPOC, LGBT, disabled, identities that aren't necessarily made for academia, or they weren't in mind when these systems were created. So I just want to give you some encouragement. Number 1, make sure to get some rest. Sleep. If you have the ability to rest your mind and your body, do what you can. I know someone in the chat here, they take melatonin gummies. If you need a little bit of assistance going to sleep, maybe a few melatonin gummies will help. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. So check with your medical doctor before you do that. The other thing I'm going to recommend, number 2, which is really important, considering all the chaos that's going on, please abstain from anything that brings you stress or worry. Simply abstain. If your news feed is depressing you, maybe take a step back and not look at it that week. if Twitter is depressing you and you have FOMO and you feel like you're burned out and you aren't working as hard as you normally would, why don't you just take some time to go do something else offline? Disconnect from the headlines. Um, Especially if you're an academic, non-academic, it's important to nurture yourself, because if you're not fully operational, then you aren't able to show up and fulfill your duties in a way that's effective. Last but not least, I want to encourage someone who may have lost like hope that no one cares, no one gets it. But rest assured, there's people all over this country in different corners of academia, different corners of politics, community organizers and the such. They're fighting. They're fighting for your freedom, your equity, your justice, and they're pushing back behind the scenes. Many of us do still care, myself included. And like I said in various podcasts, not on my watch. So if there's anything that I can personally do to encourage someone, to advocate for someone behind the scenes, I'm going to do so. Okay? If nothing else, be sure to come back here on Friday nights at 3, or Friday afternoons or night, depending on what time zone you're tuning in from. 3 p.m. Pacific. I moved the time up to accommodate a listener in Paris, France, but you'll probably sleep anyway. We've got more good content to come in form of the live stream and also in the form of recorded podcasts in the Under the Hood series. I want to thank Bohemian Gypsy, you know who you are, and I want to thank my chair, Mark Stacy, of the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at Berkeley, who has been consistently supportive of me and my efforts. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being there, and thank you for being the leader we need to see. All right, y'all. I'm going to sign out. Have a good weekend.